Take a look at these paintings. They were all done by various artists at different points in history at the peak of each artist's respective career. Do you believe me? Well, you shouldn't, because that isn't true. Because these paintings were all done by the one and only Pablo Picasso. But you probably only know Picasso for his more abstract stuff. What's even more remarkable about these paintings is that they were all done in 1896, when Picasso was only 15 years old. In Picasso's own words, he said, "It took me 4 years to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child." At only 15 years old, after training in art for only a few years, he was able to achieve a level of realism most people could only dream of obtaining. But is this what Picasso is known for? No, of course not. It's his abstract work that pretty much revolutionized the art world and made him such an incredibly successful artist. It's what made Picasso, Picasso. And if I'm being 100% honest, I don't really even care that much for Picasso's work, but he was true to himself, and it resonated with people. It reminds me of another quote I heard: "Be yourself, so the others looking for you can find you." Realism is a strange topic in art, where it seems like people who are not in the art world tend to view it as like the apex of art, the best of the best, and those in the art world tend to not view it as highly. I've struggled with this topic for many years and always found it difficult to put into words. See, my story goes something like this. As a kid, I would draw whatever I wanted and didn't really think too much about it. Eventually, when I got older, I started to take art more seriously. The initial thing that got me into drawing and painting was seeing all the art from my favorite games, movies, and shows. They're usually high concept, creative, and pretty uniquely stylized. But when I started to do my own art, I would basically just redraw portraits of celebrities that I found online, and I'm not really sure why. When I drew a picture of Buddy the Elf or Walter White, it was pretty easy to tell if I did a good job or not. These were characters everybody knew and liked, and I always received some level of praise from my friends and family, and this led to me thinking I must have been pretty good at art. These portraits weren't meaningful to me though. They were just a realistic drawing, nothing really to say, and no real emotion behind it. Nothing like the art that inspired me. I kind of started to question whether I was doing it because I wanted to, or I was just doing it to impress the people around me. It's a lot easier to draw directly from a photo rather than create something more unique, and this goes broader than just realism. I think copying from a photo or even an artist's work one for too long can become a really bad habit. And this is coming from somebody who did that for years. There's a big difference between using a photo as reference versus copying it directly. It's totally fine to do studies of artists' work or photos, and it can be super helpful, but at the end of the day, that's all it is, a study. If you draw this, and it looks like this, is it truly your work? But if you study this and maybe do some unique fan art, or even create your own thing inspired by it, that requires way more creativity. I eventually would try to make more original art or more creative fan art, but it was a lot more difficult and can even be very intimidating to go off the beaten path and put more of yourself out into the world. My comfort zone was realistic portraits. I would try to do something more stylized, but since I had been drawing realistic portraits for so long, my body would just sort of auto-correct back to realism, and I would end up with a blank face staring back at me with no real emotion. This led to some uncanny or just boring results. I'm slowly breaking away from realism and focusing more on concept and the emotion behind the stuff I make. I'm still working on it, but like Picasso, I almost had to forget some of my academic training and learn to draw like a kid again. But don't kids' drawings kind of suck? They're sloppy, they're lazy, they lack any real fundamentals, and I would be offended if somebody looked at my work and said it looked like a kid drew it. Like, yeah, your mom hung that drawing of a bumblebee you made on the fridge when you were 7, but was that bumblebee really any good? Was it? So constantly drawing realism isn't the answer, but also drawing like an actual child as a full-grown man or woman probably isn't the answer either. So, what then? By going for a realistic approach while drawing anything, you're challenging yourself to depict what you're seeing as accurately as possible, and while doing so you can learn a lot about the art fundamentals. There's a reason why art schools do a ton of drawings and paintings from direct observation, usually in the form of still lifes and figure drawings. It's a great way to learn art because when you have a clear goal to depict something realistically and it looks off, you can see, or at least your instructor can see, where you went wrong. There are clear rights and wrongs in realism. Where if it's something more stylized, it can be more open to interpretation. perspective or anatomy being wrong in a realistic drawing is just incorrect, wherein something not intended to be realistic can be classified as a stylistic choice. By practicing realism, it starts us off with a great understanding of the fundamentals and a better understanding of the world around us. Plus, whatever medium you're working in, whether it be graphite, charcoal, ink, painting, digital art, you can get such a better handle on how to use that media. I'm trying to improve my watercolor and gouache skills, so I recently painted this study based off a screenshot of Tom Hardy in the movie The Bike Riders. I learned a lot from it and it was good practice. So many of my favorite artists who are known for their more stylized work will occasionally post realistic work just to show how good of a grasp they have on realism. It's not that they couldn't do realistic work, so they just went with something more stylized. They understood realism so well and decided to go in a different direction. Realism is the best base for an artist to build their skills off of, and pretty much all artists still use lessons they learned in realism in their work today. There's also a lot of artists who sort of fall into the creative realism genre, as I call it. They still use a pretty heavy level of realism, but create beautiful, unique, and inspiring pieces. They're not just copying from a photo one for one. They add elements where they need to, and change things up as they see fit. A lot of video games nowadays fall into this category too. Ever play a game and see it being very realistic but also uniquely stylized? Showing off detailed graphic abilities while still keeping a good sense of style? The artists who make this kind of stuff could be considered realistic artists, but they aren't beholden to it. They allow themselves to break the rules where they need to. To reference Picasso again, learn the rules like a pro, so you can break them like an artist. I talked earlier about how I went through a period where I really only drew celebrity portraits and occasionally drawings from life. Drawing realistic portraits is great, and maybe you're the best at it out of everyone you know, but how much do you actually understand what you're drawing versus how much are you just copying what you see? Do you know how the face breaks into planes and how the proportions align? And when put against other portrait artists from around the world, how does your art stack up or even differ from those around you? This is Steve Huston, an incredible artist and art teacher, and he said something that really stuck with me.
What we've done is we've made art about that craft and we measure it by how good your craft is. But let's say you level up on your own, or you find somebody on the internet in your hometown that gets you to world class. You do charcoal portraits that are world class. That's fantastic. Most people will never come close to that. And yet we put your beautiful charcoal portrait in a giant gallery with all the other thousands of world-class charcoal portrait artists that are out there. They're all fantastic. Oftentimes they're doing demos on YouTube. It's incredible. But you put them in a room, can you tell the difference? Yeah. Can you tell that that guy's a little better and that guy's a little worse? How do you measure world-class? And how do you distinguish it? How do you walk in and say, oh, I'm going to buy Christian's world-class portrait rather than this fellow over here? Why would they do that when there's no real difference?
Yeah.
And that's still not invaluable or unvaluable.
Yeah.
But to me, it's not optimal. We could take it a step farther. We can take very good craftsmanship, or at least solid craftsmanship, and push it from the head, which is what craftsmanship is. It's an engineering problem.
Yeah.
And move it down into the heart, where I think art does the most good.
Did you catch that last part? Move it from your head to your heart? It can sound a bit cliche, but I can't think of a better way to say it. It's easy when you're learning art to get lost in being too analytical in an academic sense, making sure everything looks realistic, but there's no real message behind it. There is clear right and wrong in realism. It's easy to judge. If you try to draw something photorealistic and it doesn't look like that thing, then it wasn't successful. We can get so caught up on the craft that we lose any emotion behind it. I'm not saying all art has to be something incredibly dramatic and moving and emotional, but I'm saying that art with purpose behind it will always go further than art without. Whether that purpose is to be incredibly goofy or incredibly serious, it doesn't really matter, as long as it's there. I think the more we focus on realism for realism's sake, only focus on the fundamentals and not the feeling, a lot of the time, the more boring our art tends to become.
I don't think that photorealistic art is necessarily like the best form of art. I think that it's just a great way of studying nature. And then you can take that wherever you want to go.
I feel exactly the same way. In fact, photorealism as art bores me.
Yeah.
Okay, personally, my biggest fear anytime I start studying the more fundamental side of art is that I will lose track of the most important aspect of art, which is making something that appeals to people. I see this as a common struggle for a lot of artists. The more technically skilled and talented you become, the more boring your art starts to feel.
Sometimes what we think is helping our art is actually what's holding it back. There are so many examples of art that didn't have to be realistic to make an impact on people. In fact, a lot of the art that was made under strict limitations of the time turned out to be incredibly iconic. In fact, a lot of the time we over-detail a face, the less relatable and appealing it becomes. Scott McCloud talked about this in his incredible book, Understanding Comics. The book is focused on comics, but I believe it applies to all art. As we continue to abstract and simplify our image, we are moving further and further from the real face of the photo. Why then is the face above so acceptable to our eyes? Why does it seem just as real as the others? What is the secret of the icon we call the cartoon? Why are we so involved? Why would anyone young or old respond to a cartoon as much or more than a realistic image? Why is our culture so enthralled to the simplified reality of the cartoon? When we abstract an image through cartooning, we're not as much eliminating the details as much as we're focusing on the specific details. By stripping down an image to its essential meaning, an artist can amplify that in a way that realistic art can't. Another is the universality of cartoon imagery. The more cartoony a face is, for instance, the more people it could be said to describe. What are you really seeing? The fact that your mind is capable of looking at a circle, 2 dots, and a line, and turning that into a face is nothing short of incredible. More incredible is the fact that you cannot avoid seeing a face here. Your mind won't let you. Ask your friend to draw you some shapes on a piece of paper. They should be closed curves, but otherwise can be as weird or as irregular as he or she wants. Let's say the results look something like this. Now you find that no matter what they look like, every single one of those shapes can be made into a face with one simple addition. Your mind has no trouble at all converting such shapes into faces. Yet would it ever mistake this for this? We humans are a self-centered race. We see ourselves in everything. We assign identities and emotions where none exist, and we make the world over in our image. Each one also sustains a constant awareness of his or her own face, but this mind picture is not nearly so vivid. Just a sketchy arrangement, a sense of shape, a sense of general placement, something as simple and as basic as a cartoon. Thus, when you look at a photo or a realistic drawing of a face, you see it as another face. But when you enter the world of the cartoon, you see yourself. I believe this is the primary cause of our childhood fascination with cartoons. Through other factors such as universal identification, simplicity, and the childlike features of many cartoon characters also play a part. The cartoon is a vacuum into which our identity and awareness are pulled, an empty shell that we inhabit which enables us to travel in another realm. We don't just observe the cartoon, we become it. That's why I decided to draw myself in such a simple style. Would you have listened to me if I looked like this? I doubt it. You would have been far too aware of the messenger to fully receive the message. Apart from what little I told you about myself in chapter 1, I'm basically a blank slate. It would never occur to you to wonder what my politics are, or what I had for lunch, or even where I got this silly outfit. I'm just a little voice inside your head, a concept. You give me life by reading this book and by filling up this very iconic, cartoony form. Who I am is irrelevant. I'm just a little piece of you. But if who I am matters less, maybe what I say will matter more. That's the theory anyway. While reading this section for the first time some years ago, I really feel like it opened my eyes to a new reality of art. It explains a lot about what I was feeling, and also explains if you're anything like me and find most live-action remakes of animated media pretty off-putting, it's because this is a character, and this is a real person. I think a lot of these remakes just try to go for spectacle over substance. When I tried to develop my own style, it was really challenging. It was much easier to draw from a photo one for one like I had been doing. But I don't think you have to be drawing celebrity portraits to experience this. Sometimes we get so caught up in doing one thing the right way, or what we think is the right way, and all other options, potentially better options, are closed off from us. All decisions being made with the head, and none with the heart. What makes something feel real to you? Does something have to look realistic in order to feel real? Do you need to see the character's pores in order to feel something real? The first time you watched The Lion King and Mufasa died, did you think to yourself, well, only if that was a hyper-realistic lion I would have felt something? No, of course not. You cried. I know you did. I saw it. But this is what I kind of felt for a long period. The realer something looked, the better it had to be, right? The more skilled the person making it had to be too, right? Not necessarily. Well, Hollywood tends to think so with all these live action remakes. I'm not sure how much this topic will connect with other people, since for the longest time I thought I was one of the few people who actually went through this. But the more I listen and talk to other artists, maybe it's more common than I thought. What led me to make this video or to care much about this topic wasn't to shit on one style, or to say one style is better than the other. It's really when I just look at an artist's work and I see such a clear sense of style to who they are, and they found an audience who like what they do regardless of how weird or strange it may seem to other people, because their artwork isn't for the people who don't like it. It's for the ones who actually do. They stuck with it, and you can see a part of that person in their work. They didn't care about making a portrait of a famous person that was popular at the time to get views. They just made what they wanted to, and they were passionate about it. I think I got too caught up in my work being impressive to people, and by doing so, lost the passion I had for the art. Iconic styles will stand the test of time and influence the artists who are next in line. I think if you make art so strung up on the details, you miss the soul entirely. Me included. It held me back for a while, and when I finally started to deviate from it, and while I struggled at first, it felt like I had started to find my own voice. I'm not telling you to do realism. I'm not telling you to avoid realism. I'm telling you to find your own voice. I'm in no position to tell anyone the art they should be making. But I do have a lot of years of making art under my belt, and think a younger version of myself could have benefited from hearing this. Please don't use this video as an excuse to not practice drawing realistically. Personally, I think it's about finding a balance between pure fundamental skill and the emotion behind the art. Finding a balance can be difficult. Go too far in emotion and not in skill, and we end up with this type of art that's pretty rampant in the modern art world. But focus solely on craft and we end up with art that lacks any emotional attachment to the viewer. I think art does the most good when it's somewhere in the middle. Plus, a lot of artists, myself included, get stuck in the copying phase and the forever doing studies phase, and not applying what they learned from the studies to create something new. Experiment and don't be afraid to pursue new things that other people may view as odd, because who knows, it could lead to something great. When I see a painting, watch a movie, or play a game, and that thing just oozes style, realistic or not, I can't help but be so inspired by it. And it's been like that for me my whole life. All those pieces of media, the feelings they gave me, it's what made me want to do art in the first place. They had so much emotion and passion poured into them, and it's impossible for me to not be inspired by media like that, even now. I wanted and still want to make art like that, to take the passion it gave me, put it into my work, and hopefully give it to other people. I think that has a lot of value, just even in its attempt. Way more value than pumping out drawings of celebrities or over-detailing a still life. I'm still learning how to do this, and I'm not as close as I'd like to be if I'm being honest. But I think art can do amazing things when we don't put unnecessary limits on ourselves. I think that's what Picasso was trying to say, and I think that's pretty important. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps out. If you have any different opinions on this video, because this is a very opinionated video, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear what you'd have to say. But yeah, thanks again, and keep on making art. Whatever kind of art you make. Realism or not, doesn't matter. Just keep making it. Okay, bye.